I watched from across the conference table as my sister Jennifer presented her revolutionary marketing strategy to the board, the same strategy I'd spent 3 months developing in my previous life, the one she'd stolen from my laptop and presented as her own work the day before I died. But this time, I didn't interrupt. This time, I didn't stand up and scream that she was a thief. This time, I simply smiled and took notes, watching her stumble through the technical questions she couldn't answer because she didn't actually understand a single word of what she was saying. Ms. Chen, one of the board members, leaned forward, frowning. Can you explain how you plan to implement the third phase integration with our existing CRM system? Jennifer's face went pale. I could see the panic in her eyes as she frantically clicked through the slides, my slides, searching for an answer that wasn't there because that particular detail had been in a separate document, a document she hadn't found. Well, that's, she stammered. I raised my hand slightly. If I may? Everyone turned to me, and I saw the flash of relief on Jennifer's face. She thought I was going to save her, again, like I always had before. I think Jennifer should answer this herself, I said sweetly. After all, it's her strategy. I'm sure she has all the details worked out. The relief on her face transformed into pure terror. Our mother, Linda Chen, the company's CEO, and the woman who had chosen Jennifer as her golden child from birth, shot me a warning look from the head of the table. That look used to make me scramble to comply, desperate for even a scrap of approval. Now, after dying once and being given a second chance, that look meant nothing. Let me explain how I got here. My name is Sarah Chen, and in my first life, I was the family ghost, the unwanted daughter. The mistake that my mother never let me forget she'd made when she got pregnant at 42, just when Jennifer was graduating from Harvard and beginning her brilliant career. You ruined my body, my mother told me once when I was 12. I had to take 6 months off work. 6 months! Do you know what that cost me? Jennifer never would have been so inconvenient. Jennifer was 7 years older than me, beautiful, charming, and utterly ruthless. She was also stunningly mediocre at her job, but no one knew that because I'd been covering for her since I was 16 years old. It started small. She'd ask me to proofread a report, then to fact-check her presentations, then to just take a quick look at a proposal she was working on. By the time I graduated from MIT at 20 with degrees in both business and computer science, I was essentially doing half of Jennifer's job while she took all the credit. And I let her, because every time I helped her, my mother would smile at me, really smile, not the tight-lipped grimace she usually wore in my presence, and say, "Good girl, Sarah, you're finally being useful." That smile, that crumb of approval was worth more to me than anything else in the world. Pathetic, I know, but when you grow up being told you're worthless, you'll do anything for the tiniest hint that maybe you're not. I joined Chen Industries officially when I was 21. The company my grandmother had founded had grown into a multinational corporation under my mother's leadership, and I was determined to prove my worth. I worked 16-hour days. I revolutionized our data systems. I identified 3 major security flaws that could have cost us millions. I personally saved the Harrison account when their CEO was about to walk away. None of it mattered. Every success I had, Jennifer took credit for. Every idea I presented in meetings, my mother dismissed as interesting but impractical, until Jennifer repeated it word for word a week later, at which point it became brilliant and exactly what we need. I told myself it was fine. I told myself that I was contributing to the family business, and that was what mattered. I told myself that eventually my mother would see my value. I was 26 when I died. It was a Tuesday morning, and I'd been up for 36 hours straight, finishing a comprehensive restructuring plan that would save the company from the financial crisis I'd discovered buried in our Asian division's books. The crisis that nobody else had noticed. The crisis that would bankrupt us within a year if we didn't act immediately. I'd compiled everything into a detailed report with solutions, implementations, and projected outcomes. I'd backed it all up with data and models. It was the best work I'd ever done, and I was finally going to present it myself. I'd scheduled an emergency board meeting, gone over my mother's head, and insisted they hear me out. Jennifer found out. I was at my desk, drinking my morning coffee and reviewing my notes one final time before the meeting, when the chest pain started. At first, I thought it was just anxiety. I'd been having panic attacks for years, courtesy of my family's treatment. But this was different. This was crushing, overwhelming, terrifying. I tried to stand and the room spun. My vision went dark at the edges. I reached for my phone, but my fingers wouldn't cooperate. I collapsed, hitting my head on the desk as I fell. The last thing I saw was Jennifer standing in my doorway, my laptop in her hands, and a look on her face that I finally recognized for what it was. Not love, not sisterly concern, but cold, calculating satisfaction. She'd drugged my coffee. I understood that in my final moments of consciousness. She'd used the sleeping pills our mother took, ground them into powder, and slipped them into my drink. But she'd miscalculated the dose, or maybe she hadn't cared. Combined with my exhaustion and the heart condition I didn't know I had, those pills killed me. I died on the floor of my office at 26 years old, watching my sister steal. The work that would have saved the company, knowing she'd present it as her own, and that my mother would believe her because she always believed her. The next thing I knew, I was waking up in my childhood bedroom, staring at the ceiling I'd memorized over countless sleepless nights. The posters on my walls were from bands I'd loved as a teenager. My desk held textbooks from my sophomore year at MIT. My phone, ancient by the standards of my death, showed a date that made my heart stop. 5 years earlier. I was 21 again. It took me 3 days to accept that it was real. 3 days of prodding at my memories, testing details, and confirming that I had somehow been given a second chance. I had died, and I had been reborn with all my memories intact. The first thing I did was cry. I cried for the girl I'd been, so desperate for love that she'd let herself be used and ultimately murdered. I cried for the 5 years I'd wasted. I cried for the family I'd never really had. The second thing I did was make a decision. I would never, ever fix their mistakes again. Jennifer's failed presentation was just the beginning. I returned to Chen Industries a week after my rebirth with a plan. I would do my job and nothing more. I would be polite, professional, and utterly unhelpful when it came to covering for my sister's incompetence. I would document everything, and I would wait. The company, I realized, with the benefit of my foreknowledge, was already failing. Without me to catch errors, identify problems, and create solutions that Jennifer would steal, the rot would show through. The question was, how fast? The answer, it turned out, was very fast. Within 2 weeks of me refusing to help Jennifer with her presentation, the marketing strategy she'd presented, half understood and poorly executed, began to fall apart. The integration she couldn't explain in the board meeting? It didn't work. It crashed our entire customer database for 6 hours, costing us hundreds of thousands in lost sales and damaging relationships with 3 major clients. My mother called Jennifer into her office. I walked by at the exact right moment to hear Jennifer blame the IT department. "Sarah," my mother's voice rang out, "get in here." I stepped into the office where Jennifer was standing with her arms crossed, looking annoyed, and my mother was behind her desk looking furious. "Fix this," my mother said without preamble. "The database crash, it says it was caused by the marketing integration, which means it's Jennifer's project, but she's too busy with high-level strategy to deal with technical issues. Handle it." In my previous life, I would have said yes immediately. I would have spent the next 72 hours rebuilding the integration from scratch, making it work, and ensuring Jennifer looked like a genius. "No," I said. The silence in the office was deafening. "What did you say?" my mother asked, her voice dangerously quiet. I said, "No, I'm not part of the marketing department. I'm a data analyst. This isn't my project or my responsibility. If Jennifer designed the integration, Jennifer should fix it. Or the IT department can, since implementing integrations is literally their job." Jennifer's face had gone red. "Sarah, don't be ridiculous. You know you're better at this technical stuff than I am. I need to focus on the big picture." "Then you should have thought about the technical implications before you presented the strategy," I said calmly. "I have my own projects to complete." "You little—" Jennifer started forward, but my mother held up a hand. "Sarah," my mother said, and her voice was colder than I'd ever heard it. "You will help your sister. That's an order." "No," I repeated. "You can fire me if you want, but I won't do work that isn't mine and let someone else take credit. Not anymore." I walked out before she could respond. my heart pounding but my head clear. In my previous life, that confrontation would have destroyed me. Now it felt like breathing for the first time. My mother didn't fire me. I think she was too shocked, but the temperature in the office dropped noticeably. Jennifer stopped speaking to me except when absolutely necessary. Our mother assigned me to grunt work, data entry, filing, organizing old records. Work that was technically within my job description but was clearly meant to be punishment. I did it all without complaint, and while I did, I watched the company begin to crumble. The database crash was just the start. Without me to quality check Jennifer's work, her next 3 projects contained significant errors. A product launch was delayed by 2 months because the market research she'd presented was outdated. I'd always been the one who actually did the research. A partnership deal fell through because Jennifer promised capabilities we didn't have. I'd always been the one who ensured our proposals were realistic. A major client pulled their contract because Jennifer had fundamentally misunderstood their needs. I'd always been the one who actually read the briefings. Each failure, my mother defended Jennifer. Each time she blamed external factors, bad luck, or other departments. She never once considered that maybe her golden child wasn't as brilliant as she'd always believed. But the board noticed. 3 months after my rebirth, I was called into a private meeting with Thomas Wright, the company's CFO and the only board member who'd ever treated me with respect. He was in his 60s, had worked with my grandmother before she died, and had a reputation for seeing through bullshit. "Sarah," he said, closing the door to the conference room behind us, "I need you to be honest with me. What's going on, I'm not sure what you mean, sir," I said carefully. "Cut the crap," he said, but not unkindly. "I've been watching you for 5 years. You're brilliant. You've got your grandmother's instincts and 3 times her education. But suddenly, about 3 months ago, you stopped contributing. You do your assigned work and nothing more. You don't volunteer ideas. You don't catch mistakes. You don't stay late. Why?" I looked at him for a long moment, weighing my options. Then I made a decision. "Mr. Wright, can I ask you a question? In the 5 years I've worked here, have you ever seen me receive credit for anything significant?" He frowned. "Jennifer presents most of the major initiatives. Have you ever wondered why Jennifer's presentations always sound like she doesn't fully understand her own proposals?" His frown deepened. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that I'm done being my sister's ghostwriter. I'm done fixing her mistakes and watching her get promoted for my work. I'm doing my job, the job I was hired for, and nothing more. If that's a problem, I'm happy to resign." Thomas stared at me for a long moment. Then he said, "Don't resign. And Sarah, start documenting everything. Every task you complete, every request you receive, every meeting you attend. Send me a weekly report directly to my personal email. Can you do that?" I could, and I did. Month 4 was when things got really interesting. Jennifer, increasingly desperate as her failures mounted, began actively trying to sabotage me. She deleted files from the shared drive that I needed for my work. She scheduled meetings at the same time as my presentations and then claimed I'd missed important company events. She spread rumors that I was mentally unstable, that I was jealous of her success, that I was trying to undermine the company. I documented it all. Every deleted file backed up, every scheduling conflict noted with timestamps, every rumor traced back to its source. And I kept doing my job, just my job, nothing more, nothing less. The company's stock price began to drop. Clients were leaving, partnerships were dissolving. The board called an emergency meeting to discuss the company's unexpected downturn. My mother, in that meeting, gave an impassioned speech about market fluctuations and external pressures. She presented a recovery plan, Jennifer's recovery plan, that promised to stabilize everything within 6 months. I said nothing. I'd seen that plan in my previous life. It was the plan that had accelerated our collapse because it was based on fundamentally flawed assumptions. Jennifer didn't understand the financial crisis brewing in the Asian division. She didn't know that 3 of our major suppliers were about to go bankrupt. She didn't realize that our largest competitor had just secured our most valuable clients. I knew all of it because I'd discovered it in my previous life, and I'd prepared a comprehensive solution that Jennifer had stolen moments before my death. This time, that solution existed only in my head, and I was keeping it there. The recovery plan failed spectacularly. Within 6 weeks, two of the predicted revenue streams had completely dried up. The stock price dropped another 15%. Two board members resigned. The Wall Street Journal published an article questioning Linda Chen's leadership. My mother aged 10 years in 2 months. Jennifer looked perpetually terrified. And I kept coming to work, doing my data entry, and sending my weekly reports to Thomas Wright. Then came the day that everything changed. I was at my desk when my mother's assistant appeared. Ms. Chen wants to see you in her office now. I walked into my mother's office to find her behind her desk, Jennifer beside her, and two security guards by the door. My stomach dropped. "Sarah," my mother said, and her voice was shaking with rage. "You're fired. Security will escort you out. We'll send your personal belongings to your apartment." "On what grounds?" I asked, calmly, though my heart was racing. "Sabotage," Jennifer spat. "We know what you've been doing. Deliberately causing the company to fail because you're jealous of me." It's pathetic. I almost laughed. Almost. I've been doing my job, nothing more, nothing less. If the company is failing, perhaps you should look at the person responsible for all the failed initiatives. "Get out," my mother said. "You're a disappointment and a traitor. I should have known better than to expect anything from you." Those words in my first life would have destroyed me. Now they just made me sad. Sad for the woman who was so blind to reality that she was willing to sink her own mother's legacy rather than admit her favorite daughter was incompetent. "Fine," I said, "I'll leave. But for the record, when this company collapses, and it will, remember that I tried to help and you refused to listen. Remember that every solution you needed was right in front of you and you threw it away." I walked out with my head high, the security guards trailing behind me. I cleaned out my desk under their watchful eyes, taking only my personal items. I didn't need the files or the data. I had everything I needed memorized. And I had one more card to play. The day after I was fired, I sent an email to Thomas Wright. It contained everything. Every project I'd completed that Jennifer had taken credit for, every problem I'd identified and solved, every warning I'd given that had been ignored. 5 years of documentation, compiled and cross-referenced with timestamps, witnesses, and proof. And attached to that email was a 200-page document, my comprehensive analysis of the company's problems and my detailed solution plan. The plan Jennifer had stolen in my previous life. The plan that could save Chen Industries. I sent it with a simple message. "You asked me to document everything. Here it is. Do with it what you will. I'm done." 3 days later, Thomas called me. "Sarah Weschel," he said, "can you come to the office tomorrow? There's an emergency board meeting and your presence has been requested." "By whom?" I asked. "By me. I'm invoking my authority as CFO to demand a full investigation into the company's management structure. The board has agreed. Sarah, what you sent me, if even half of it is true, we've been defrauded for years." I showed up to that board meeting in my best suit, carrying a tablet with every backup file I'd ever created. My mother was already there, looking furious. Jennifer was pale and shaking. Thomas sat at the head of the table, and the remaining board members filled the other seats. "This is ridiculous," my mother said the moment I walked in. "She's fired. She has no right to be here." "Actually," Thomas said calmly, "her termination is under review, as is yours. Sarah, please sit down." For the next 4 hours, I presented everything. I showed them the original files of projects Jennifer had claimed as her own, complete with metadata proving I'd created them. I showed them email chains where Jennifer had asked for my help and then presented my work as hers. I showed them the warnings I'd given about problems that later materialized. I showed them the solutions that had been ignored. And then I showed them my analysis of the current crisis and my plan to fix it. The board members asked questions, which I answered in detail. Jennifer tried to interrupt several times, claiming I was lying, but Thomas cut her off. "Ms. Jennifer Chen," he said formally, "do you deny that Sarah created the marketing strategy you presented 3 months ago?" She helped, but the core ideas were mine." "Yes or no? Did you create it?" Jennifer's silence was damning. "And the product launch proposal, the partnership framework?" The client retention program? More silence. Thomas turned to my mother. Linda, were you aware that Jennifer was claiming credit for Sarah's work? My mother's face was a mask of fury. Jennifer is a visionary. Sarah is a data analyst. It's natural that Jennifer would refine and present Sarah's technical work. That's not what I asked. Were you aware that Sarah was creating these initiatives and Jennifer was presenting them as her own original work? They're sisters. They should work together. Sarah was being petty and selfish by refusing to help. Answer the question. My mother's jaw clenched. Yes, I was aware, but Jennifer is the face of this company. She has the charisma and the vision. Sarah is too young, too inexperienced. Sarah has 2 degrees from MIT and has been single-handedly keeping this company running for 5 years, Thomas said flatly. She identified the Asian division crisis 6 months before it became critical. She predicted the supplier bankruptcies. She developed contingency plans for every major risk we faced. And you fired her for refusing to continue working for free while someone else took credit. He pushed a stack of papers across the table to my mother. This is your resignation, effective immediately. The board has voted unanimously to remove you as CEO. Jennifer, you're also terminated for fraud and corporate theft. Security will escort you both out. I watched my mother's face crumble, watched Jennifer start to cry, and felt nothing, no satisfaction, no vindication, just a bone-deep weariness and a sense of closure. Sarah, Thomas said, turning to me, the board would like to offer you the position of Chief Operating Officer, working directly under me as interim CEO. Your first task will be implementing your recovery plan. Your salary will be triple what you were making. You'll have full authority over all departments. Are you interested? I looked at my mother, at her shock and horror and disbelief. I looked at Jennifer, at her tears and her fury and her fear. And I looked at Thomas, at his steady gaze and his outstretched hand. Yes, and I said, I'm interested. The next 3 months were a whirlwind. I implemented my recovery plan with ruthless efficiency. I restructured the Asian division, cutting the failing branches and reinforcing the successful ones. I renegotiated our supplier contracts, finding new partners to replace the ones I knew would collapse. I personally reached out to every major client we'd lost, armed with data showing exactly how we planned to address their concerns and detailed proposals for future collaboration. It worked. Slowly at first, then faster. Revenue stabilized, then grew. The stock price climbed. New contracts were signed. The Wall Street Journal published a follow-up article calling the turnaround miraculous and praising the fresh leadership at Chen Industries. I worked 18-hour days, but this time it was different. This time, every ounce of effort I put in was recognized. This time, my name was on the projects. This time, when I succeeded, I was the one who was praised. Thomas proved to be an excellent mentor. He taught me the political side of corporate leadership, the networking and relationship building that I'd never had the chance to learn. He introduced me to contacts across the industry. He backed me publicly and privately, making it clear that I had his full support. 6 months after my rebirth, the board promoted me to CEO. Thomas moved to chairman of the board, and together, we rebuilt Chen Industries from the ground up. We implemented new policies on transparency and credit. We created mentorship programs for young employees. We built a culture where merit mattered more than family connections. The company thrived. As for my mother and Jennifer, their downfall was swift and comprehensive. The board's investigation uncovered years of financial irregularities. My mother had been funneling company money into Jennifer's personal accounts, disguising it as bonuses and consulting fees. Jennifer had been charging personal expenses to the company card. Together, they'd embezzled over $2 million. Criminal charges were filed. My mother tried to fight it. She hired the best lawyers money could buy, money that was frozen the moment the charges were filed. She gave interviews claiming she was the victim of a corporate coup, that I was an ungrateful daughter who'd betrayed her family. Nobody believed her. The evidence was too clear, too damning. She was convicted of fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. She was sentenced to 7 years in federal prison. Jennifer pleaded guilty in exchange for a lighter sentence. She got 3 years plus restitution. She sent me a letter from prison, claiming she was sorry, that she'd been pressured by our mother, that she'd never meant for things to go so far. I didn't respond. What was there to say? The trial revealed other things too. Things I hadn't known even in my previous life. How my mother had systematically undermined me from childhood, telling teachers I was lazy, telling coaches I wasn't talented, telling family friends I was troubled. How she'd hidden letters from my grandmother before she died, letters where my grandmother had asked to see me, where she'd wanted to include me in the business. How Jennifer had convinced my high school boyfriend that I'd cheated on him, ruining what had been my first healthy relationship. Years of sabotage, exposed for everyone to see. I watched the trial from the gallery, taking notes from my therapist. Yes, I'd started therapy. Turned out, being murdered by your family in your first life and then systematically gaslit for years creates some issues that need professional help to work through. My therapist asked me once if I felt guilty for their downfall. No, I said honestly, I feel sad. Sad that it had to happen this way. Sad that they chose themselves over me, over the company, over basic decency. But guilty? No, I didn't make them steal. I didn't make them abuse me. I just stopped enabling them. Everything that happened after that was a consequence of their own choices. It's been 3 years since my rebirth. I'm 24 years old in this timeline, 29 if you count my previous life. Chen Industries is stronger than it's ever been. We've expanded into 3 new markets, doubled our revenue, and been named one of the best companies to work for by several major publications. I live in a penthouse apartment downtown, paid for with my own money. I have a small circle of friends who knew nothing about my family until I chose to tell them. I'm dating a software engineer I met at a tech conference who thinks I'm brilliant and tells me so regularly, which still feels surreal. I never visit my mother in prison. I've sent her exactly one letter, which said simply, "You could have had a daughter who loved you. You chose a fantasy instead. I hope it was worth it." She writes to me sometimes, long rambling letters about how she's sorry, how she misses me, how she wants to make things right when she gets out. I don't read them. My assistant files them in a folder I'll probably never open. Jennifer gets out of prison next year. I've already instructed my legal team to send her a cease and desist letter if she tries to contact me. I've also hired a private security firm to monitor for any potential threats. I don't think she's dangerous, but I also didn't think she'd kill me in my first life, so I'm not taking chances. The company my grandmother built is thriving. I visit her grave sometimes and tell her about the new initiatives, the expansion plans, the culture we're building. I like to think she'd be proud. I've started a foundation in her name that provides scholarships to young women in STEM fields, particularly those from difficult family situations. Every year, we award full ride scholarships to 20 students. Every year, I personally meet with them and tell them, your worth is not determined by your family's opinion of you. Your value is inherent, and you deserve to take up space in the world. And I wish someone had told me that when I was younger, but I'm telling them now, and that matters. Sometimes, late at night, I think about my first life, about the girl who died on an office floor, alone and unloved, her work stolen, and her worth dismissed. I think about how different things could have been if someone, anyone, had just seen me for who I was. But then I think about who I am now, the CEO of a multi-million-dollar company, a leader who's respected and valued, a woman who's learned to stand up for herself and demand the respect she deserves. I think about how I saved myself, how I stopped fixing their mistakes and let them face the consequences of their own incompetence, how I documented everything and waited for the right moment, how I took back what was mine and built something better. It wasn't instant, it wasn't easy. The first few months of saying no were agony, fighting against years of conditioning that told me I was only valuable if I was useful. There were nights I cried myself to sleep, terrified that I was making the wrong choice, that I should just go back to being the helpful daughter who never complained. But I pushed through. I learned to sit with the discomfort, to tolerate the disapproval, to accept that some people would never see my worth no matter what I did. I learned that I didn't need my mother's approval or my sister's validation. I learned that I could be my own person, make my own choices, and build my own life. And I learned that sometimes the best revenge isn't grand or dramatic. Sometimes it's simply refusing to participate in your own oppression. It's doing your job and nothing more. It's documenting the truth and waiting for the right moment to reveal it. It's watching the people who wronged you face the natural consequences of their actions without your interference to save them. My mother destroyed her own company. Jennifer ruined her own career. I didn't have to do anything except stop cleaning up their messes. That was enough. The company collapsed in 3 months, just like the title of my story promised. But from those ashes, I built something better, something mine, something that reflects my grandmother's values and my own vision. I have a new family now, built by choice rather than blood. Thomas, who became the father figure I never had, my assistant Marcus, who's more loyal and supportive than any sibling. My friends from MIT who visited me every week during the trial and celebrated with me when I was named CEO. My boyfriend James, who loves me for exactly who I am. On my 24th birthday, Thomas threw me a surprise party at the office. The entire executive team was there, along with several board members and key employees. They'd decorated the conference room with photos from the past 3 years, me at ribbon-cutting ceremonies, accepting awards, speaking at conferences, leading meetings. Speech, someone called, and suddenly everyone was chanting it. I stood up looking around at all these people who genuinely cared about me and felt emotion tighten my throat. 3 years ago, I said, I made a decision. I decided to stop fixing other people's mistakes and start building my own success. I decided that I was worth more than being someone's ghostwriter. I decided that I deserved to be seen. I paused, gathering my thoughts. That decision cost me my family. But it gave me all of you. It gave me this company, this career, this life. And I wouldn't change it for anything. I raised my glass. To my grandmother, who built something worth fighting for. To Thomas, who saw my potential when no one else would. And to every person in this room who's helped me become who I am today. Thank you. The applause was thunderous. Later that night, alone in my office after everyone had left, I stood at the window looking out over the city. The lights stretched out before me, thousands of them, each one representing a life, a story, a possibility. In my previous life, I would have died never knowing my own worth. I would have died thinking I was the problem, that I wasn't good enough, that I deserved the treatment I received. But I didn't die. I was reborn, given a second chance. And this time, I chose myself. I chose to stop fixing their mistakes, and the company collapsed in 3 months. But from that collapse came freedom, justice, truth, and a life worth living. My phone buzzed with a text from James. Dinner tomorrow? Want to celebrate your birthday properly? Just the two of us. I smiled and typed back, Perfect, I love you. 3 words I never thought I'd be able to say to anyone. 3 words that in my first life I desperately wanted to hear from my family. 3 words that I'd learned to give to myself first before I could truly accept them from others. I love you. I closed my laptop and headed home to my beautiful apartment, to my chosen family, to the life I'd built from the ashes of the one that was stolen from me. The company collapsed in 3 months after I stopped fixing their mistakes. But I didn't collapse. I rose. I soared. I became everything they said I couldn't be. Everything they tried to prevent me from becoming. And that, in the end, was the sweetest revenge of all. 3 years later, Chen Industries is valued at over $3 billion. We've been acquired by an international conglomerate, with me staying on as CEO of the subsidiary. My personal net worth is in the hundreds of millions. I've been featured in Forbes, Fortune, and Business Insider. I'm regularly invited to speak at conferences about leadership, corporate turnarounds, and building healthy company cultures. I've written a book about my experience, heavily fictionalized to protect myself legally, but the core truth is there. It's called The Ghost in the C-Suite: How I Stopped Being Invisible and Started Leading. It became a bestseller within 3 weeks. My mother will read about my success from prison. Jennifer will see it when she gets out and tries to rebuild her life. They'll know that I didn't just survive without them. I thrived. They'll understand finally what they threw away, but I'm not doing it for them. I'm doing it for me, for the girl who died believing she was worthless, for every person who's ever been made to feel invisible by the people who should have loved them most, for my grandmother, whose legacy I've honored and expanded. I'm doing it because I can, because I'm worth it, because I deserve it, and because sometimes the best way to move forward is to stop going backward to fix what was never yours to fix in the first place. The company collapsed in 3 months after I stopped fixing their mistakes. But I built an empire from the ruins, and I'm just getting started.